Hello everybody. So I've been convinced by enough of my friends on social media that there is an interest in me reading one of my short stories to you at this time of isolation, when actually somebody telling you a story can be a nice way to escape for a little while. So I'm going to read one of my short stories. This one came out in a collection called A Queer Kind of Justice, Prison Tales Across Time, which is a few years old now. It's still available as an ebook via Bold Strokes Books. So if you go to www.boldstrokesbooks.com, you can buy the whole thing. I might read some more of them if people are interested. This one is from midway through the book. It's actually called A Queer Kind of Justice. It was this story I took the title from. And it's a historical story, as most of mine are, and as all of the stories in the book are, it's set in a prison, which may seem appropriate for this time when we're all isolated and longing for escape. I don't know how good I'm going to be at some of my French pronunciations. It's a lot easier to write them than it is to read them, so do bear with me. Also, I'm reading off a laptop, so as I scroll, imagine that I'm turning the pages of a book. So, for this story, we go back to Marseille in France, 1832. There are whispers of escape. Whispers in the Chateau D'If, you understand, are hints that come to you on the stale air. A shout of a madman in the night. A muffled conversation between the keepers. No one is close enough to actually whisper in my ear. I am isolated in this rough stone-built cell, which should be enough to send me mad. And yet the talk of escape quickens me. If it is possible for one, why not for another? Pressing my head to the cold, pale stone that frames the small window of my cell, I gaze at the free world outside. From here, beyond the iron bars, I can see the outside wall of the fortification, built not to keep the likes of me in, but to keep marauding attackers away from the coast. Redundant now, falling into disrepair. Those ramparts will never be tested. And now I suspect they never will be. Who would waste their time attacking an island prison? Beyond the crumbling masonry lies the Mediterranean, deep, cool blue, the surface sparkling with dancing slivers of reflected sunlight. The sea taunts me most of all, as it carries the world past my prison. I see little boats and large ships sometimes coming and going to the harbours and docks of Marseille. I wonder if the crews and passengers stare at the fortified island with curiosity or horror. Do they feel my eyes on them from behind my bars, or do they simply pass by, forgetting the souls incarcerated here? When the sea is not reminding me of the humanity I've left behind, its very watery, deep, calling presence is the worst torture of all. I long to strip off these old rags and to dive into that water, a sleek shape disappearing beneath the sunlight into the depths. I can feel every centimetre of skin soothed by the cool water. I feel it embracing me, enveloping me, reaching every part of me. If I open my mouth, it is filled with salt. If I open my eyes, they are blurred and they sting. My ears are dull, and all the hot, unwashed parts of me are cooled and made clean. The sea makes me whole and pure again. I spend whole days at this window, gazing into the sea. I watch the changing colours from bright blue of morning to the faded gold of the sunset. I see it on the rare, dull day when it is grey and forbidding, and I watch the white horses dance when there is a good breeze to fill the sails of passing ships. By the end of the day, my skin feels raw and dry, with my need to be wet. My cell feels hot, the stone so very unforgiving and dusty. I sip the brackish water I am given to sustain me, and let the moisture linger on my lips and tongue, savour it as it slips cool down my throat. I allow a tiny, precious drop to escape and trace a trail from the corner of my mouth over my chin and to my throat. I often ponder, if I could slip out from these bars and immerse myself in the sea, would I ever want to resurface again? Such small pleasures are all that is left of me. My detention here is interminable. I was not tried nor sentenced. I am here at the mysterious Chateau D'If because they do not know what else to do with me. I am held here as Armand Philippe, Marquis d'Alencourt, the title by which I travelled and was known for the last 20 years. So many noble titles were lost or confused during the Revolution and the Reign of Terror. It was a simple task to select the one I liked the sound of and pass myself off as the rightful holder. Of course, I was not born a Marquis. I was not born Armand Philippe. I was born Caroline Archambault in the small village of Saint-Paul-sur-Tournois, not far from Calais. How Caroline Archambault ended up as a nobleman trapped behind the bars of Chateau D'If is a story that seems remarkable, even to me. My childhood is unimportant, except that I grew up surrounded by stories of a man from our village who was one of the driving forces of the Revolution. As soon as I understood the tales of the gutters of Paris running with aristocratic blood, I was horrified. Whatever pride I was supposed to feel in the Revolution, I was instead frightened, as only a child can be, and had horrendous nightmares of the guillotine coming from me, of mine being mistaken for a noble in some way, though I mostly helped my mother milk our 3 dairy cows and spent my days in tomboyish pursuits such as catching small fish in the river and climbing the trees at the end of our field. I was born, you see, in 1792. All I knew as I matured were the stories of the Revolution and the Terror. I grew to hate it. And when the Emperor Napoleon rose to power, I hated him more. If he was to be a new interloping monarch, then what had been the point of the bloodshed and the fighting? My father did not like his daughter being so interested in politics, nor so scornful of our leaders. He was not much interested himself and thought it easier to keep it to himself and to farm the land. I was frustrated by his lack of action, even more frustrated when he tried to keep me from reading the reports from Paris, telling me it was not my business as a woman. I could not understand such thinking when I felt more drawn to action than any man I knew. When I was 15, my father died. I went to Calais into service in the hope of earning enough money there to support my mother and younger brother. In the big town, I had even more ability to learn the news, not just from Paris now, but from the wars the Emperor was fighting on our behalf. And in Calais I learned too how we were seen from the other side. The British still came to Calais. It was still a meeting point of Flemish traders. I heard speculation that France would conquer the world, and I heard rumours that would be entirely destroyed and become another colony of the British Empire. I realised then I felt no loyalty to my nation, nor was I drawn to the posturing of the pompous British, who seemed most of all to be terrified the revolution would reach their shores and wanted our monarchy to be restored at almost any cost. Calais saw the comings and goings of French aristocrats, still nervous, but less in fear of their lives now. I saw their British, Flemish and Prussian counterparts, and it was hard to tell the difference. I served them wine and cheese, I fetched and carried. And I fell in love. Love was unexpected. The Comtesse Henriette d'Orsay, who insisted on being called Madame rather than Comtesse. She liked to eat fresh peaches and apricots and to drink white rather than red wine. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, although she was not quite as a woman should be. Her skin was olive, tanned rather dark. Her hair was black and quite straight, and her keen eyes were very dark and large. Though slender, her light muslin dress could not disguise the curves of her hips, rather more pronounced than one might have expected on a woman who did not appear to have a large appetite. Her voice was musical, and even to be ordered to fetch a drink by this woman was a wondrous thing to me. I did not stop to worry that the object of my affections was a woman, like myself. It did not matter. I did not think she would pay me any attention or that she would notice me in any way. At least I did not imagine it was possible. But there were moments. A coy glance in my direction when I thought she was reading. A lingering brush of my hand when she passed me an empty plate to take away. One day she passed me in a passageway and stopped me, grasping my arm rather firmly and looking me up and down. "You know," she said in that voice I could not resist, "you could easily pass for a boy. If you cut those ringlets off, it would suit you." She was not the first to observe it. My mother had often lamented my chances of marriage, for I didn't just look like a boy, she said, I carried myself like one as well. I should walk with smaller, daintier steps, not gesticulate so much, try to be more feminine. A common criticism from my mother, yet from Madame, It seemed such a compliment I couldn't help but blush. "Thank you, madame," I stammered, feeling my palms grow sweaty. "You're most welcome. I should like to see you in the outfit of a boy as well. You have the figure for breeches, I fancy." I blushed harder and was lost for words, but that night in my chamber I took my scissors to my hair and cut away the offending ringlets. The clothing I could do nothing about, not having the money for a new outfit, but I could show that I had heard madame's words, that I wanted to please her. As each straw-coloured ringlet fell to the ground, I felt lighter, more myself suddenly. I could barely contain my excitement. Not for one moment did I consider that what my mother would have thought or what the other servants would say. I could not wait for madame to see me. I chose my moment after breakfast the following morning. I waited until all the other servants were gone and madame was alone. Almost casually, I let my white cap fall from my head and slide onto my shoulders. For a few seconds she didn't notice at all, and my heart thudded in my chest, terrified suddenly of being made a fool. But then she looked up, and she saw. Her face was suddenly illuminated in a broad, knowing smile. "My child," she exclaimed, "come here and let me see." She held out a graceful hand to me, and I went to her, took her fingers in mine. She stood to inspect my cropped hair, ran the fingers of her other hand over my short locks. The feeling of such contact sent a shock of pleasure through my whole body. I wondered if she could know the effect she had on me. She pushed me to arm's length, hands on my shoulders, and admired me. "And I see my judgment did not fail. You would pass as a boy." "You have excellent judgment, madame." I said it shyly, unsure of myself in such proximity to her. "Yes, but do you like it?" "Yes, I do. I find it liberating, madame." I did not hide my eagerness, so that she might know I was not solely intent on pleasing her. I was enjoying the new freedom of my short hair. I was enjoying the idea I might be taken for a boy. "It suits you better than ringlets." Madame looked coy. "In fact, since you are such a convincing boy, I think I must steal a kiss." I stared at her with a mixture of fright, intrigue, and longing. "Pardon, madame?" "A kiss." She leaned closer to me. I smelt the lavender oil she perfumed her clothes and hair with, an intoxicating scent that seemed to hold me captivated. She slid one hand to the back of my neck, running her fingers through the rough ends of my short hair, and pulled me closer. I felt giddy and made no attempt to struggle. I could see the fine lines at the corner of her dark eyes, the intricate patterns in the iris of her eye. I could see the powder on her face, each lash of her eyes, and then she was out of focus, and all that existed was the feeling of her soft, warm lips pressing against mine. I made a small attempt to kiss her back, and when she responded, there was a release of the tension building inside me. I'd never been kissed before, let alone gone any further, but suddenly I wanted her with her infuriating beauty and soft, gentle lips. I reached out a hand and grasped her slender, corseted waist. I pulled her closer with a little more force than I should have done. Her kiss deepened briefly, then she pulled away. In my dismay, I tried to pull her closer. I could not bear the cold distance now between us, but she held her ground. Eventually I realised she was smiling, her face a little flushed, and I felt pleased with myself. She was not offended. "Well, well, Caroline," she said, "you are very like a boy. Only I prefer you to any boy I have kissed before." I flushed deeper at her words, and I could feel my pulse thudding all the way to my fingertips. "Later, come to me, and we'll see how you look dressed as a page rather than a maid." I was dismissed then, but my mind was not on my work all day. I daydreamed and fantasized about madame. I imagined myself by her side, protecting her and loving her. I'd be a better husband and companion than any man. She might even love me back. Later, I presented myself as requested. She reclined on a chaise lounge and indicated a bundle of clothes on a chair nearby. "Put those on," she commanded, and I was inclined to grant her anything. I undressed in front of her. There seemed little point in trying to retain any modesty. I wanted her to see me, and she watched as I peeled off my apron and dress, followed by the petticoats I wore underneath. Briefly, I was naked before her, and I felt her eyes on every part of me, making me flush, and the blood rushed to the sensitive parts no one had ever seen. I wished she would touch me then, could almost feel what that touch would be like. The warm air in the room teased my skin, encouraged my imaginings. But she had ordered me to dress, so I reached for the clothes she provided. In just a few moments, I was transformed. The narrow breeches and stockings clung to my thin legs. The shirt disguised the small swelling of my bosom and was covered anyway with a waistcoat of exquisite jacquard, almost too good for a page. The shoes were a little too large for my feet and felt rather heavy, but I was still pleased when I looked down at them. Finally, Madame rose to her feet. I watched the folds of her cotton gown caress her body as it readjusted itself around her. She approached me with a tricorn hat in her hand and placed it on my head. She tilted it back at a slight angle and then stepped back to inspect me. "Ha! It's perfect," she said delightedly. I smiled too, enjoying her delight as much as I was enjoying the feeling of my new costume. I was surprised to find the man's clothes felt as natural and comfortable as they did. "Yes, madame." I said it demurely, not sure what to do. I wanted to reach for her and kiss her again, but I was still her servant. "You will do me a favour, to test how good you are at being a boy." "Anything, madame." I burned with curiosity to know what she wanted. She opened a drawer in a table nearby and removed a small sealed envelope. She handed it to me. "You will take this to the inn on the Rue des Petits Puits. You will inquire there for a man named Clement. He will be wearing a green coat and carrying a bicorn hat under his arm. You are to give him this letter and then return to me." I had no qualms as I left the house to do as Madame instructed. In my new outfit, I was rather more confident than ever, sure I could conquer the world if I had to. Not one person gave me a second look as I walked the 10 minutes to the Rue des Petits Puits. I strode through the door of the inn with all the cocky self-assuredness I'd witnessed in men entering such an establishment. I felt powerful and free. I carried out my task and returned to Madame as quickly as possible. I hoped for a reward, I suppose. "You have not asked," she said, as I stood before her again, "what the contents of the letter were." "I do not really care, madame," I replied. It wasn't entirely true, but I wanted to appear as nonchalant, as if this were not an extraordinary adventure. I wanted to impress her. "Then you show a pitiful lack of curiosity. I shall tell you anyway. That gentleman is an agent of the British. I passed him information I heard about Napoleon's next plans and one or two tidbits of information about the marshals of the empire that might be of use." I opened my eyes widely. I had not suspected Madame of treason. I did not mind the betrayal of France, but I was frightened for the consequences. "But why, madame? It is dangerous." "My mother and father were killed in the Revolution, yet my brother joins the army of Napoleon and will no doubt get himself killed on some Spanish battlefield. France has taken my family from me. Britain fights against France. That is all I need to know." "Do not tell me you are a Bonapartist, child." "No," I said hurriedly. "I cannot choose a side in all of this." "Excellent," she said. Her smile was knowing, cunning, if only I'd seen it. That night she allowed me to lie with her in her cool sheets, the heat of her body beside me. I lost myself in her, in the power of her touch, and the intoxication of her kisses. From that moment onward, and for the next 6 months, I was her messenger, her lover. I grew more and more at one with my role as a page or a messenger boy, and soon did not bother with my feminine clothes at all. It did not matter what other servants thought. I was Madame's lover, and that gave me status over all of them. I carried her secret envelopes and coded messages, and I had the perfect disguise, a page boy who could prove she was in fact just a servant girl and therefore confound anyone who chose to investigate. Not that anyone ever did. And through those long summer nights I was by her side, enjoying her and the haven of her sweet, whispered words. She was a sly bitch. One evening, just half a year from the night I'd cut my hair for her, I returned to the house to find her gone. She'd sent me away for a whole afternoon on several errands, promising to reward me well on my return, but now she was gone. I went through the drawers of the study and the drawing room, checked the secret places of her chamber. There was nothing left, just a faint tinge of lavender in the air. I was still upstairs when I heard the clear sound of someone throwing their whole weight against the door and then running footsteps. The door was opened and I heard men's voices raised in anger. Then a gunshot. I crept to the landing at the top of the stairway. From there I could see the door. In the doorway was a man in uniform. On the floor, not yet dead, was Jacques, the groom, who'd been the victim of the gunshot. I wondered why on earth Jacques would have answered the door until I realised that all of the other servants were gone. The house was empty. The uniformed man bent over Jacques, pressed his hand brutally onto the gunshot wound. I heard his demand. The traitorous bitch who runs this household, or the little slut maid who passes for her page. Tell me where they are, or I will kill you. He was too late. I watched in horror as Jacques gasped, and then his body relaxed into death. I could do nothing for him. I had to save myself now. I ran from the landing down the servants' stairs to the back of the house. Instead of the main door, I took the passage which led to where the well was located at the side of the house and slipped out into the alleyway alongside it. No one saw me go, but still I walked as fast as I could without arousing suspicion into the heart of the town. My heart was pounding, partly with the echo of the gunshot wound, the fear that such a terrible thing could happen to me, but mostly with the horrible, sickening knowledge that Madame had saved herself at my expense. She'd escaped without me and left me to be found in her place, blamed in her place. She did not love me. The rage tore at my heart for days. I slept in alleyways eating scraps I stole from market stalls and wished I was dead. But one day, as the midday sun was burning overhead, I heard a story from the battlefields. The British and Portuguese had won at a place called Vittoria, and the French army was in retreat over the Pyrenees. I could not help a spark of interest. Madame was not the only reason I had willingly become an agent of the British against France. I found it fascinating to be part of these stories, to influence events that formed the chattering of the men in the marketplaces. That evening, I restored some of my self-respect. I brushed the dirt from my coat and straightened my tricorn hat. I walked into a tavern in town and introduced myself as the Marquis de Alincourt for the first time. It was easy to make people think I'd simply fallen on hard times, so many of the nobility had. I was given ale and food. I sipped the ale slowly and pondered my next move. Then fate played her hand. Into the tavern walked no other than that agent of Britain I had seen that first night, the man in the green coat with a bicorn hat. I had nothing to lose, so I approached him. That was really the beginning of it all. For a while, I was a British agent. I passed as a man the whole time. Whether my masters and partners in the enterprise knew or suspected there was anything less than authentic about me, they never let on. They were as good at keeping secrets as I was. I did not want to be a woman again, to be seen as weak and in need of protection. I enjoyed my new identity too much. I was given some small payment from the British, enough to purchase clothing more suited to my adopted rank, and I started to prefer the uniform of a French officer, whose loyalty would never be doubted. I wore the fine green coat and cavalry breeches of a captain in the 8th Dragoons, and found it suited me very well indeed. Soon I realised I had no more loyalty to Britain and her allies than I did to France. My loyalty was to myself. And there was a very fine, if dangerous, game to be played in playing both sides. I became a double agent, then a triple agent. I took no side, glorying in the power I established for myself. There were risks, yes, but my heart had been broken and I no longer cared for myself, just for the next thrill, the next twist in my tale. I remembered Madame the whole time. She was in my mind as I weaved one story after another, as I crossed and double-crossed, delivering messages and stolen secrets. All the time I was proving myself more cunning than she had ever been, far braver than she was. I erased the memory of her touch, with the touch of countless other women, whores mostly who paid no heed to what was under my uniform as long as they were paid. One or two other women who seemed instinctively to know my secrets came to share my bed. One, my pretty Teresa, who I met in the Pyrenees, I thought I might almost have loved. But I wouldn't love. It was too dangerous. My passion was all for the danger now. I coped remarkably well, perhaps because those in power recognised my usefulness, perhaps because they did not realise the influence I came to have. I rode from the front line at the Battle of Toulouse to see the Emperor in exile at Elba. I heard the cannon of Waterloo from my tavern in Brussels. Once Napoleon was defeated, my work was not done. Still, the British worried about what was happening with the newly restored French monarchy, and still the French were suspicious of British and Prussian intentions. I played my game, passed them the information they wanted, then rode away before too many questions could be asked. I would disappear, only to reappear when I could be most useful. I tricked them all. Skinny Caroline Archambault from Saint-Paul-sur-Tournois, whose mother worried if she was too much like a boy, had more sense and cunning than some of the most powerful men in Europe. The Marquis d'Alencourt became an essential, though mysterious, contact of diplomats across the continent, and no one was quite sure whose side he was on. I loved the power of it. But everything ends. The rumours of escape were true. A man in one of the cells below died, and another with whom he had been communicating got himself taken out of the prison in the place of the dead man's body. He swam away through the dangerous currents which swirl around this rocky little island. I envy him the swim. Who knows if he escaped or drowned? I still envy him the water on his skin. I know the rumours were true because suddenly the guards here were worried that the rest of us may try something similar. They came into my cell to put heavy chains around my ankles. I protested that I paid to be treated better, to have a cell with a window, a fireplace, no chains. I said I was a nobleman, but they just laughed and continued their work. The chains are heavy and already begin to chafe my ankles. They're terrified we'll be inspired to escape like the man in the cells down below. No matter how much money you can bribe them with, they're feeling embarrassed and no doubt have been chastised by their superiors. So we must suffer. It almost makes me hate the fellow who escaped. But I don't know his story. Perhaps it is not unlike mine. I do not protest against my treatment too badly. I don't wish to draw much suspicion on myself. I still pass as the Marquis here in my old tattered gentleman's clothes. I don't want them to have cause to question that. To be considered a woman would be dangerous in this man's prison with its male guards. Besides, to be forced back into the role of a woman would be like a betrayal of myself. I am Caroline no longer. I am Armand Philippe. In 1830, the Bourbon monarchy was overthrown. Again, I'd seen it coming. What I had not anticipated was that the New Orleans monarchy would bring about my downfall. But there were new nobles, new inhabitants of my world of secrets and lies. I tried to play them, but perhaps I was losing my touch. At a meeting with an unfamiliar British agent, I was taken by French soldiers. I'm still not sure which side betrayed me, which side wanted to see me behind bars. I awaited trial, perhaps execution. I made my peace with the Lord and waited. But nothing happened. Then one winter day, I was brought in a locked carriage to Marseille. My hands chained, I was rowed to Chateau D'If. Such a pretty setting in the Bay of Marseille, the blue sea lapping at the rocks. It's not a chateau, of course, it's a fortification. From the outside, formidable and imposing. I stared at it in wonder, a myth brought to life in front of me. It was a queer kind of justice, I suppose, since I'm certain men had been sent here on my secret information in the last 2 decades. The reality of that had never struck me before. So I am trapped in this cell. Even with these chains, I can see out of the window and gaze at the sea. I still don't know at whose orders I am here, or if I will be released. Maybe I know too much. But then why not just kill me quietly and have done with it? Perhaps it is that I know enough to keep me alive. Perhaps they see that I will have my uses again in the future. Or maybe they wish to torture me when death would be a peaceful end. The not knowing is the worst of it. Every time a guard comes to the door, I wonder, will I be executed? Will I be released? Is there a use for me again? If I am released, will I look for Madame and see if she still lives? Take my revenge, or make love to her again? Does she matter any longer? So I look out to the gentle sea and I wonder, could I escape as the man below did? Swim away through that endless blue without being lost to it? Do I want to? Do I watch the ocean waiting for the boat that will come to take me away, be it under a French flag or otherwise? The salt breeze drifts through the barred window. warm, a caress on my dry skin. It brings dust, but also the scent of the sea. And mixed with it all, haunting me always, I swear I smell the faintest hint of lavender oil, the reminder of love that never really was. Everything ends. The illusion of love ends. Freedom ends. Incarceration ends too, and I will feel the water on my skin again. I must believe it. And that's where the story ends. I do, however, provide a historical note. I'll read that to you now. Chateau D'If found fame in Alexandre Dumas' The Count of Monte Cristo, to which you might have noticed this story pays homage. It is a real fortress, begun in 1524, just west of Marseille. Mostly home to political prisoners, it assumed a legendary status as a harsh and inescapable prison. And you can read more about it if you Google it. I hope you enjoyed listening to that. It's half an hour out of your day. The message is that incarceration ends, so let's hope we all have that to look forward to sometime soon. Thank you for listening, everybody, and do leave me comments if you liked it, and I'll consider reading another story as well. Have a nice weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.